hey, howdy, hey folks, this is MaxNation1980 here, and I'm back with another animation ramble. The reason why I temporarily stopped was because, well, I went to Florida. I went to Disney World. I did a lot of things. I didn't have time to do rambles and such, or anything outside of blog posts. So, I'm back, and in the last video, I went over the Warner Animation Group film Scoob, the update of Scooby-Doo, which is sure to be a pretty decent animated film and one that actually gets the character. That is currently set for September 21st of 2018. Another animated film is set September 21st of 2018 as well, and that is Sony Pictures Animation's Hotel Transylvania 3. Genndy Tartakovsky returns to direct, and it seems like Adam Sandler and Robert Smigel are not returning to pen the threequel, but rather Austin Powers writer Michael McCullers. Now, this excites me, because I didn't really care for I didn't care that much for the first Hotel Transylvania. It had good animation. I think Genndy brought a lot of energy to what was actually a pretty stilted script. I didn't really check out the second one, but what I saw of the second one, it was more the same. And apparently the reviews seem to think so as well. Maybe I should give it a watch. But 3 booting Adam Sandler and his camp off of the picture, or at least dialing them down a bit, that gives me some hope. Because, you know, Adam Sandler, you're not going to get the best of writing. Whereas with Michael McCullers, you might get something that's sharp, something that's funny, something that's even edgy, but in a good way. I think Hotel Transylvania has potential because I like the setting, I like the characters, and I've always liked the premise of the series. I like the idea of a hotel for legendary monsters like Dracula, Bigfoot, you know, the Blob, and all the other monsters out there. But I just thought that the first movie was noise, and the whole plot just felt kind of forced. There were some moments that I did like, and there were a couple gags that were pretty funny. And again, it was very nice to look at, and the cartoony animation was good, but I found it to be so forgettable, and I know some people out there really, really love it. It's cool that you love it. I'm glad that you get something out of it. It didn't do much for me. I found it to be very forgettable. And I didn't really bother with 2, but I understand people like these films, and hey, there's always room for improvement, so I think Hotel Transylvania 3 could be a pretty decent movie. Again, Michael McCullers of Austin Powers fame, you know, apparently he's going to be the only one writing it, and I don't think Adam Sandler and Robert Smigel are returning to write it, or maybe they are, I'm not too sure. But it seems like McCullers is handling it alone, but if he isn't, I still have a lot of hope. And Genndy's back to direct it. I mean, come on Sony, what are you doing? Why are you holding Genndy Tartakovsky back from doing his personal pet project? Can you imagine? I mean, you announced it a couple years ago and you were so excited about it. I understand that things changed after the hack, you know, the whole thing having to do with the interview, but really, Sony Animation, this is the direction you want to go ahead with? You know, you're canceling projects like Kazorn and the Unicorn, you remove Lauren Faust from Medusa, and you're going forward with things like the Emoji Movie? I sincerely hope that Genndy's directing Hotel Transylvania 3 just so he can move on to do Can You Imagine, because his Popeye movie is a no-go at Sony at this point. It's going to be done by somebody else because the Sony heads did not like his vision for Popeye. He didn't like his classical take on a classic character. You know, they probably want something more modern, something more cynical, something that's just, you know, hey kids, this is an old character that your mom and dad and your grandparents knew. You know, they get the grandparents and the parents in as well. It's like, oh yeah, remember them? Here they are reinvented. Worked for the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies. Okay, maybe not the 4th one, but yeah, all rambling about that aside, I really hope that Genndy Tartakovsky gets to do the features he wants to make and not be stuck doing things like Hotel Transylvania sequels. But it's good to know that he's coming back to direct the 3rd one, and maybe with better writing, I can finally get the Hotel Transylvania film that I wanted. That's also set for September 21st, 2018. One of those movies is Blinking, because in this day and age, I don't think you can really put 2 animated features up against each other, unless one of them is very, very low budget. Sony Pictures Animation is likely going to spend less than $90 million on Hotel Transylvania 3, and Warner Animation Group, well, they got Lego Movie out for $60 million, and they got Storks out for $70 million. Warner Animation Group outsources their projects to other studios. Warner Animation Group, it's interesting, it's like a chain of studios doing their films. The Lego films are made by Animalogic, who are the same people who did the first Happy Feet and Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, along with the effects for several films like 300 and such. Whereas Sony Pictures Imageworks did Storks, and the movie Smallfoot is going to be done in Madrid by Sergio Pablos at his studio. So Warner themselves don't have a feature animation unit, it's a group. And I like that they're honest about their name, you know, Warner Animation Group, WAG. It sounds really cool. Paramount Animation, for some reason, isn't doing that. Paramount doesn't have an in-house studio. They are essentially releasing animated movies made by other companies. Monster Trucks is made by Disruption Entertainment, Sherlock Gnomes will be made by Rocket Pictures and MGM, and also Micros Image, and the movie Amusement Park is going to be done by Ilian Animation. They're the people who did Planet 51. They're a Spanish studio. Anyways, both of those movies are going to be low-budget, Scoob and Hotel Transylvania 3, but I suggest that one of them should move. To give the movies some room to give themselves, room to breathe. I don't believe that animation cannibalizes itself. I don't think animated features cannibalize each other if they're released too close to each other, but some chunks are taken off of each other because, people are choosier these days, and I read some stats saying that the average American family only goes to the cinema 4 times a year because of the prices. Yeah, one of them should move. Hotel Transylvania 3 perhaps should be the one to move because Warner Animation has kind of siphoned the September slot away from Sony. Sony used to be the one that kind of settled their, if Pixar went to summer and Walt Disney Animation Studios went to fall, then Sony Animation kind of just took the late September slot, like, oh, you know what, this is ours. Now Warner Brothers comes crashing in and says, nope, it's ours now. But who knows what will happen. But I have a feeling that one of those two features is going to move. It's not 1988 where The Land Before Time and Oliver and Company could open the same day. Times are different. There are no animated features currently slated for October of 2018, which makes, in mid-October, it's a prime slot. Somebody move there. All right, now, moving on to November 9th, 2018. I already talked about this movie because when I talked about it back in roughly May of this year, it was still set for 2017, and that's Illumination's Grinch movie. I'm not going to talk about that because I already did. It's a few rambles back. It's in the 2017 section. But yeah, they delayed it, and interestingly enough, I guess it was to make way for... I guess it was either to give it more time, or maybe it was because Universal is currently quietly working with DreamWorks' schedule, and they're trying to accommodate them. I'm hearing rumors about certain DreamWorks movies kind of moving. I won't go too much into it because I'm waiting for DreamWorks to make an announcement of some sorts. We saw them recently remove The Croods 2 entirely from their schedule. That was a real shocker. So that long rant that I did on it, that long ramble that I did on it, it's all moot now because DreamWorks and Universal canceled the movie. But anyways, Illumination's Grinch, I'm iffy on it. Could be great, could be like The Lorax, where it's just mediocre, or it could be just decent. Next up, and this is going to be a big one, Walt Disney Animation Studios' Gigantic. Originally set for March 9th of 2018, Wreck-It Ralph 2 pushed it out of that slot, and now it's set to open on November 21st of 2018. As you guessed, this is Disney's new take on Jack and the Beanstalk, and instead of having it be a story about Jack climbing a beanstalk and meeting an evil giant, he climbs up to a world of giants, and there are good giants, but there are also bad giants, and he has to help this little girl giant get home. And I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. It's going to be directed by Nathan Greeno, who was one of the directors of Tangled, and it's also going to be directed by Meg LaFauve. Meg LaFauve was one of the writers on Pixar's Inside Out, and she also wrote Pixar's The Good Dinosaur. Now she has shifted over to Walt Disney Animation Studios. She will write and direct this movie with Nathan Greeno. And this is pretty exciting because it's another female director for Walt Disney Animation Studios, and this movie will also be her directorial debut, so this is pretty exciting. And Gigantic has had something of a history, a secret history. Originally, Walt Disney Animation Studios wanted to release Gigantic around this time. Originally, Moana was going to be the spring 2018 film. Now, Disney never officially announced that. But inside the studio, based on murmurs and rumblings I've been hearing, it's, originally the plan was Zootopia, Gigantic, and this is back when it was called Giants, then Moana, and then a space movie. But things have changed, and that's the usual with animation studios. Things don't always go according to plans. Slates change, some projects move up, and some projects move back. So Gigantic has moved back quite a couple of times, and I've heard that it's had story problems over the years, and that it still has story problems, so the addition of Meg LaFauve as director and writer makes sense. Anyways, I was always excited for this because even though it's going to be similar to the Renaissance pictures in the way Moana and Frozen are, it's going to be different too. I haven't seen Moana, but from what I know, as of this recording, it's November 27th. I haven't seen Moana because, I've been super busy, and when you're on vacation, the last thing your family wants to do is go to the movies, When you're in Disney, I would have loved to have gone to see Moana in theaters because they have a theater down there in Disney Springs, but, you wouldn't do that. You want to enjoy and soak up all the parks while you can. But from what I understand, there is no love interest whatsoever in Moana, and that's great. And in the case of Frozen, Kristoff kind of becomes a love interest at the end, so we've been seeing the love story get bucked a bit. And that's good, because the Renaissance, I think, kind of ran it into the ground. Every single film from that era had a love story of some sorts, even if it wasn't with a protagonist, like with Hunchback of Notre Dame. You had the romance between Esmeralda and Phoebus. And I'm glad that the newer films and I'm glad that the newer Renaissance-style pictures are kind of bucking some trends while also following them, with the big musical numbers and the big adventure, the big battle with the villain at the end, the big climax. In a way, we're getting the comfort food, the menu favorites, but served up a little bit differently this time. And Gigantic looks to follow that. It's going to have music from the Lopez's, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, because their best work in Frozen really soars, but the stuff I don't like, Fixer Upper, the stuff I don't like as much, well, I just hope that's not the case with Gigantic. Hopefully all the songs in Gigantic are strong, well written, and there are no tossaways, no juvenile lyrics, that are shoehorned into these songs, because I think Frozen kind of suffered from that in a few instances. But most of the songs in Frozen I thought were pretty solid, if not great. There were a couple that are great. Let It Go is awesome, even though it's been drilled into our head a gazillion times. I'm sick of the song, but I'm not going to deny that it's great, and it's a great, anthemic song. Well, I just hope that with Gigantic, all the songs are consistent, but I hope the story, is consistent too. The script is consistent. I'm the odd one out here. I actually think that Frozen is the weakest of the current Disney Animation Studios crop, in that I think it suffers from tonal issues, it's rushed, I think it's very hastily put together, it had a very troubled production, it was really rushed, I don't want to get into that, though, because that's another ramble for a ramble, but that's another ramble for another day. I've already rambled about Frozen so much, I don't want to do this ad nauseum, so all I'm going to say is, I hope that Gigantic is more tangled than Frozen, while being its own thing at the same time. And I hope that they really take advantage of the world that they're setting up, a whole world of giants. That just really excites me. The storm giants being the bad guys, and then there's good giants, and it's going to be set during the age of exploration in Spain, so I wonder how history is going to factor into this story. I'm really interested to see how it all coagulates into one really cool whole, because this kind of fantasy, I think Disney animation is just perfect for, just a world of giants and all this world building, Zootopia works so well because of that. It had all this great world building. And I look at more experimental features from last decade, like Atlantis and Treasure Planet. Those had fantastic world building, so... And Wreck-It Ralph had great world building. I like world building, if I didn't say it too many times. If I didn't say it enough already. If I didn't make it clear, I love world building. I love movies that set up fantasy worlds, and if they're good, they're ones that are compelling. I want to live in these worlds, and I want to see Disney Animation do more of that. And I think they did just that with Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph. So I hope that they do that with Gigantic, along with a couple of other things. An add-on to the whole love story thing, I've heard, and this is just rumors, that Jack already is married in this story, and that his wife, I think the wife's name is Angelica or Angelique, she's going to be pregnant during the course of the film. And interestingly enough, back when Gigantic was called Giants, Angelica or Angelique, that name was applied to a different character, because originally it was going to be a love triangle story, and it was going to be much more complicated than the story we're going to get. Inma, who's the little girl giant that Jack is going to help in the movie, she was originally, if I remember correctly, she was going to be this tomboyish warrior type, or this wannabe warrior, and she had something to do with the plot, and there was a love triangle between Jack, Marco, and Angelique, or Angelica, whatever her name. I think it's Angelica. Angelique, that's the name of that fox in Rango. That's not Disney. But Gigantic is still miles away, and major changes could come, because again, I heard that it still had problems even after they overhauled the whole thing. Again, it's been in development for so long now. And as long as they get it, as long as they fine-tune it, as long as they make it good, that's all I care about. Some projects at Disney have lingered for years and years, and turned out to be pretty good, if not great. I mean, Tangled had multiple iterations, starting in the 90s and into the early 2000s. You know, Rapunzel and Braided, which was going to be very Shrek-like. Rapunzel went through all these iterations, and finally, the released movie, Tangled, turned out to be great. Wreck-It Ralph originates from an 80s project called High Score, and then it became Joe Jump in like the early 2000s, and so hopefully Gigantic will be, you know, because Gigantic sounds like a completely different film from Giants. Giants was the movie that was in development from roughly 2011 to 2014. But I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. Gigantic, it's Walt Disney Animation Studios. It looks to really boost a classic fairy tale. It looks to be a very different telling of a familiar tale. And yeah, it sounds awesome.